Welcome back. Later in the show, we'll tell you about the sex life of robots. But first, scientist Duncan Laurie built his glass and steel laboratory on the coast of Rhode Island. Here, Duncan conducts experiments that test the limits of human perception. I went to his lab where he demonstrated plant communication and the astonishing and outlawed science of radionics. Duncan Laurie is an award-winning glass and metal artist. From his incredible workspace come laboratory located on a lush peninsula off the coast of Jamestown, Rhode Island, Laurie experiments with some astonishing electronic devices. On a beautiful summer day, he explained what the science of radionics was all about.
These are radionics devices and a short history of radionics device. This is called a pathoclast. Photographs of fields were placed on the device. Certain times they would actually cross out some of the crops. If there were bugs on the crops and they wanted to use pesticides, they'd place a pesticide on the photograph. They'd put it in the device. They'd push the button and boom, they do this 4 or 5 times a day. They measurably reduced the predation on the fields, even selectively, row by row. This is a matter of historical authenticity, as unbelievable as it sounds. What you have here is what's called a specimen well. Into this, you would put a representation of whatever it is you're working on. If it was a person, it could be a blood sample. It could be a photograph. It could be anything that indicated what it was that you wanted to work on.
When you say it can be a blood sample or a photograph, a blood sample is straightforward. I get that. I understand that. Why a photograph?
Well, anything, blood sample contains DNA. For some reason, a Polaroid, where you have both the positive and the negative image of whatever it is you're using, for some reason it works. I don't think anybody knows why a photograph would work, but we know this because this device was extensively tested by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture in the 50s, prior to all of this stuff being outlawed. This is where the discussion gets very cryptic and very surreal. It's also true that the mafias use these things. I mean, I talked to a couple of investigators who said they had consulted with the FBI in cases where devices of this kind, especially that powerful one, were used in potential murders. It's occult technology, and until they find out how it works, and then it becomes mainstream science technology, right? Yeah. But for our purposes, sure they are.
You're listening to the sound of plants communicating.
Back in the 70s, there was a lot of research about plant consciousness, and some of this had to do with the fact that plants reacted to signals that were coming from other plants, and these could be detected very much like the sensors we have here. In fact, Clive Baxter was a man who had it was a lie detector equipment, wired plants up, found that one plant that wasn't wired up would react to harm that the plant that was hooked up, and vice versa. So you had this plant symbiosis of signals, something like perhaps it's some field phenomena happening between plants. He even went so far as to hook up shrimp that were on a timer, and at a certain point the shrimp would fall into scalding water, and the scalding water, they would die immediately, and the plant on the electroencephalogram would go, rah! You know, just the signal would go crazy. They'd be screaming, essentially, feeling the demise of the shrimp. I'm thinking that it's possible that by running these signals through audio processors, sophisticated ones, that we're revealing more of what's in the signal, not just adding something to a simple pitch shift, because of the fact that there's a complex biology involved, that we're opening that signal up. The more it opens up, the more it seems the plants want to do. The more range you give them of expression, the more they seem to work with that range and produce an incredible deeper effects, just like there. All of a sudden I'm talking about it, and the next thing we know, the thing's boosting itself right up. So there's this funny reciprocity between the plant and the operator and whatever else is going on in the room. You put on some music, all of a sudden they seem to be pegging themselves to the music. Is that a magnetic phenomena, or is that a biological phenomena? I can't say, but it's wild to see it. These things are also interacting with other invisible realms. I mean, how do I know that there isn't, a gnome living in that tree that's taking advantage of this to express itself, you see? What this stuff is a way of looking at a technology which keeps it a little bit out of like the ego potential of the operator to amass personal power and then do, various different things with it for personal gain. This is sort of more oriented towards how does the technology, how can it be used in a creative context? You say, how do you want to use this to produce art? Can you move weather with it? Can you affect crops? Could you do something with this artistically that would be like a crop circle, you see? Where certain amount of the field you treat, certain amount you don't, it's in the design. Now if somebody did that using this technology, it would wake up millions of people to the potential of what this kind of energy is. The Indians and the Native American people did this a lot, but we don't view it through that lens. We view it through a cultural lens and as part of the technical level that they had at that time when they were working with bows and arrows and hide and everything else. We say, well, it's got to be on that level, can't be more sophisticated. Until you look at the fact that information is being used here in a subtle way, coupled with earth energy. So imagine that symbol is a personal intention that this individual as an operator is using on a highly active spot on the landscape energetically to broadcast his intention to affect the condition of that he wants to improve. He has tribal, some suffering, there's lack of water. So they go to these places, they hammer one into the wall, they put this prayer into it, and all of a sudden you have an energetic change. You have a rainstorm coming in. I saw this happen in the Hopi Pueblos. Every year the snake dance would be performed in an area where they have 6 to 8 inches of rainfall a year. Within 20 minutes of the finishing of the dance, the weather was coming in, it was raining. You can't tell me that's just coincidence. So somehow they're using directed intention through design, through art, coupling it with physical energy, subtle energy of some kind, and making things happen. Why aren't we doing that? We're supposed to be so advanced, How come our artists are sitting around making, these self-reflective, metaphorical pieces that are just basic commodities?